Stephen Buck, the Executive Director of the Office of Juvenile Affairs, joins us here in the Oklahoman's video newsroom. I'm Dave Morris. Looking forward to this conversation. Good to see you again, sir.
Nice to see you. We had a great visit on United Way in the state charitable campaign last time we had a chance to visit.
You did a fantastic job in front of the cameras then.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, but I have to tell you, I take this opportunity to brag on my staff. Just today, OJA accepted the award for state charitable campaign.
Congrats.
As far as the largest increase of any state agency. And the colleagues who work at OJA were 1,300% higher this year than they were last year in support of the campaign.
Wow.
And I'm so extraordinarily proud because, you know, and sometimes I think we developed a little bit of a perspective on government employees that is very frequently unfair. And I am so proud of my colleagues. I mean, we've had tough budget times in the state. And my colleagues stepped up and have chosen to reinvest in their community and meet the needs of Central Oklahoma. And I'm just extraordinarily proud.
Meeting the needs in a generous way, so that's great.
That's right.
You've been in the position of Executive Director OJA for about a year now.
That's correct.
How's it going?
I have thoroughly...
From your perspective, how's it going?
I've thoroughly enjoyed my year of service to the agency. It is truly a privilege to have the opportunity to serve the state in this capacity. We talk a lot within our agency about our commitment to the 1-4-1 principle, which is we as an agency wanted to design our services and our interventions to make sure that every kid who comes into our care sees themselves as the most important kid in the care of the state. And that's really a challenge for us, but I think it's absolutely essential because our youth are so important. At the same time, we have an accountability to the 4 million taxpayers of the state. And so we want to make sure that while we're delivering that personalized, high-quality care, we have to do so in an accountable, efficient manner. And I have so enjoyed working with my colleagues, and that's the 1-4-1. Each kid deserves the best care, 4 million taxpayers. I need OJA to be an employer of choice in state government. And that's why I mentioned this contribution we made to state charitable campaign. We want to employ the best, and we want our employees to be the best.
Talking with Stephen Buck, he's the Executive Director of the Office of Juvenile Affairs. The 1-4-1, it seems like that could be overwhelming to give, you know, every kiddo, every juvenile, they're the most important person in the room, but there's value in that.
It's an incredibly challenging ask. And what that has required of my staff and our contracting partners is to really understand that when you have about 5,500 kids who actually come into the system every year that you begin to have some level of high level of work with, some sort of case file, if you will. It really requires us to hone in on that individual kid's trajectory. Because if we don't provide the tools necessary for those kids, it becomes a generational thing. Because the majority of these kids are going to leave our care, they're going to become adults, and once they're adults, they're going to be your and my neighbor. And so what we ask our staff to do is really focus on 4 specific domains in care. We ask our staff to be invested in helping our young people fulfill their educational ambitions. We ask them to help these young people prepare vocationally and professionally. We want to spend a lot of time working on overall health profile, whether that be mental health needs, substance abuse treatment needs, just general health care. And then the 4th of those 4 domains is just relationships. For so many of these kids, I mean, consider that 60% of the kids who come into our care have a prior history of DHS child welfare involvement. Clearly, in their case, relationship has been an on-again, off-again type of environment. In order for them to be successful in the community, we want them to understand what it's like to have a healthy relationship. And so those 4 areas, asking our staff to spend time and effort there, that's going to have a great return on the state, but it is hard, challenging work.
So instead of perhaps a correctional approach, it's more of an educational type approach?
Absolutely. Now, correctional approach is very important. We have an important role to play.
So perhaps not just a correctional approach.
That's correct. We have to make sure that those individuals that are at such a high level of acuity that they may pose a threat to our neighborhood or whatever the case may be, we have to provide safety and services there. Very important. But again, I want to underscore the way the law is structured, the majority of these young people, the vast majority, are coming back to the community. So even for the child who comes to us with the most...
Which is the goal.
Right. For the child who comes to us with the most extreme of offenses, it makes sense for us to diligently invest in that young person in those 4 core areas to make sure that when they return to the community, they will have the opportunity to be successful.
as NPR would say, make us smart on the topic of OJA. What is OJA, and how has that changed in the past year, what you thought OJA was versus now your understanding of what OJA is?
So OJA, the Office of Juvenile Affairs, is the authority for juvenile justice across the state of Oklahoma. There are 4 counties, Tulsa County, Oklahoma County, Comanche County, and Canadian County, that have a unique relationship. They're called bureau counties, and so it looks a little bit different in those 4 counties. But in the other 73 counties, we have the responsibility for at-risk kids who have been adjudicated into our care. Adjudicated is a word that simply means that there's been a court finding that suggests there had been an act, a criminal act that was made, that they should receive intensive supervision or services from the state. So that's who we are. We do placement ourselves where they're in our care in one of our secure care facilities. The majority of our kids are in the community living with their mom, dad, brother, sister, whomever, and we're serving them in a supervision type of role. So what has really been different? In my previous role within state government, I had the privilege of serving with Commissioner White at Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
You were there for quite a while.
Yeah, very good friend. I served with her for nearly 10 years, and had a lot. Had a chance to work with the juvenile justice population in that regard, but in that role it was kind of a statistical group, a subset. And since I've had a chance to come over here and work specifically with this group, what I'm finding is these are the same kids I was working with previously. It's just their level of acuity and the fact they're criminally justice involved has made their unique needs that much more amplified. And so it has really been encouraging.
Why is that?
So when you have criminal justice involvement stepping into the picture, if you think about what happens when somebody penetrates deeper into our system, if you think about somebody who goes behind the fence, and I use behind the fence to describe our secure care environment. Okay. As somebody penetrates more deeply, they are beginning to have as their population mates other people who have higher levels of acuity. When you think about Joe Albaugh at the Department of Corrections, when people go into DOC for a period of time, we often have the conversation that we are preparing them to be better criminals. The same might be true in juvenile justice services, that when a kid goes behind a fence, they are among the highest levels of acuity. If we can serve them effectively in the community in early level engagement, a lot of those behaviors that they pick up that leads them to a high risk of criminal justice involvement, they can be mitigated on the front end. Very, very important to understand that.
We're chatting with Stephen Buck, the Executive Director, Office of Juvenile Affairs. The legislative session is underway. How's that going?
For us, I will tell you the last budgetary years certainly have been a challenge for the state. They've been a challenge for our agency. We have been very fortunate, though, as we begin to have these conversations about how to serve more effectively and serve more consistently. We perhaps have not seen some of the hard impacts of the budget cuts that other agencies have. And I'll tell you why, because there's a definite price for us to pay in this. Because of the way we are a large facility operator, I have 3 brick and mortar campuses. For these budget cuts last year, we made the decision of, rather than cutting services to the young people in our care, we basically rated our capital infrastructure. So if I have a generator go out on one of my campuses, I don't have money to pay for a generator repair. And so we have effectively said that serving kids is our highest priority, and we have taken a little bit of a leap of faith that our facilities hold together. And so I'm having a lot of hard conversations. The governor, in her budget request, she actually articulated that OJA may be an appropriate recipient of bond dollars should the legislature show a willingness to bond for construction and modernization of facilities. That is a big priority of mine at the budget, is to do what we can to make sure we're the most efficient operationally, because if we're efficient operationally, my need of state appropriated dollars is significantly impacted as far as budgetary growth, and it allows me to focus on more front-end services. So that's the budget picture for us.
You mentioned brick and mortar. I believe you have a couple of facilities, maybe one's in Tecumseh, and various, you mentioned the education part, graphic design or automotive shops. Those are examples.
Yeah, that's a great example. We work very diligently with our partners such as Career Tech and State Department of Education both to make sure that as part of our behind the fence care that we are offering state-of-the-art education services. For example, we actually are a charter school operator. The Oklahoma Youth Academy provides educational services in my facilities in Tecumseh and Manitou. And we pair very unique educational opportunity. Here's a did you know. The average young person who comes into the care and who goes behind the fence for us reads and has math skills at the 5th grade level. I have a lot of remediation to do with these young men and young women. So the ability to have a specialized charter school, graduating a lot of kids. These are kids who are now leaving with a credential, and not only are they leaving with an academic credential, they're also getting meaningful workplace skill, such as an oil change. So maybe they can go down to their local automotive repair shop when they get out, and they can have a job changing oil. It's that starting place.
Makes sense. Back to the legislative,
Yes,
couple request bills. Senate Bill 632, the education of students in state care.
Now, Senate Bill 632 is a really important policy discussion for the state. And this is a very, very complex education. You know, education is always one of the most heated conversations at the Capitol. And the way that we are entering the discussion this year, and we're doing this working with DHS because it would also apply to their young people as well. When a young person starts 9th grade, 10th grade, and then the state, and again it's the state decision, moves them to another placement. Currently, their academic trajectory is determined by the school district in which they reside. So if a person starts their high school career in school district X, which has one set of graduation requirements, their senior year, they might go to school district Y, which has an entirely different set of graduation requirements. And for a kid who's laboring in the classroom, who thinks they're about to climb that mountain, they might get discouraged at that.
I was about to say that could be very overwhelming.
Exactly. It could really overwhelm them, and when you get frustrated, you drop out. And so the premise of 632 is relatively simple, which says that if you are a kid in state custody, you are being moved, not of your own accord, but because the state says you will move, you are going to have the opportunity to use as your core graduation package the state mandated minimum core. So it doesn't matter what school district you would reside in, you could reflect upon that minimum core and use that as your threshold. We think it's an important conversation that could really improve educational outcomes for the young people in our care.
Your thoughts on that bill this year?
I'm very optimistic. It has gone through the first phase of the process. Senator Sharp has the bill, and it had a do pass recommendation from committee. It'll soon be going to the floor of the Senate, and we look forward to continuing to have conversations on the bill.
And Senate Bill 229, mental health treatment.
This is very important. I know that previously, I believe you've talked about the Mark Costello Act in some of your conversations with Commissioner White and in years past, which basically allows for this concept of assisted outpatient treatment. This is for a person whose level of mental illness is such that they need, or court intervention would be helpful to make sure they stay in treatment so that we don't have those negative outcomes. When the bill was passed last year, there are two provisions in there that help qualify a person for this court order. It is for somebody who has been hospitalized twice in the last 36 months, or for somebody who was treated in a specialized treatment program at the Department of Corrections. The bill did not articulate people who'd receive services in OJA treatment environments. And we certainly have young people who at the age of 18 have been in our care who have significant mental illness. They would benefit from this process as well. So this bill is a relatively simple bill at face value. It just affords to our young people as they turn into adults, it affords the opportunity for them to take part in assisted outpatient treatment when warranted.
Deleting the certain age restriction.
Not necessarily the age, but allowing for the specialized care that our kids got while they were in our services to qualify.
Okay, how about budget? You mentioned money earlier and the fact that you're taking a look at that. Budget requests?
Yeah, our budget request was relatively simple this year, and when I had a chance to speak to the combined Health and Human Services Committee or Human Services Committee, I actually had the opportunity to talk to them about the fact that our budget in many ways actually represented more of a blueprint of where we want to go, kind of our roadmap ahead. If we can address some of the infrastructure needs we spoke about earlier, if I can make sure that that system is whole, we can do very well if we can hold even in terms of our budget this year. So unlike some of my sister agencies that need significant large requests in order to be successful, we just need to be able to stay competitive in that arena, and we can make some good decisions that can help us be much more accountable, more efficient for the taxpayer, but also deliver better services. So for budget, for me, it's not talking about large numbers. For me, it's about having very strategic conversations about how we can become more efficient and productive.
All right, a couple final questions for you. Leading right out of that, what is your goal moving forward? You've been in this position for a year. What's next for you?
So,
or what's next for what you want to do in this position?
So I have a really, and I have to be very careful how I say this. So any of my employees who might see this, anytime I use this comment, they get nervous. But
that's a good tease right there.
Yeah, right. I mean, I am really privileged to serve as the executive director of an agency that truthfully, if the state was willing to do certain things, keep kids in the classroom learning, make sure that the kids and their parents had access to mental health and substance abuse treatment, and to make sure that we were doing what we can to preserve healthy relationships, whether that be through faith community partnerships, whether that be through the role of our sister agency, DHS. If we could do those three things, the number of kids who come into the care of my agency would decrease dramatically. And so I have the unique perspective of serving an agency that the formula for significantly changing the imprint I have on the state budget, it's there. Early intervention, early prevention, significant expenditure prior to a kid becoming adjudicated could fundamentally change the shape of juvenile justice. And if that were to occur, I would truly be focused on those really hard, challenging, acute kids. And our resources could go into focusing on those who just have an extremely high level of acuity, have very troubled backgrounds, and have made the decisions that give us pause and concern. So my goal is to have that message, is to make us a smarter agency in terms of our efficiency and our accountability, to lead the discussion on how we can change our budgetary imprint with smart facility design and move services to the front end so we turn off the faucet of the kids coming into our system.
Got it. You mentioned before we got started here, you thought this position was a little more rewarding and uplifting than perhaps you expected?
It was. You know, unfortunately, when you think about how or what gains viewership, what gains readership, whatever medium you're in, unfortunately, we have a tendency to be attracted to the system failures. That tends to draw most conversation and most discussion. And so there are a lot of amazing things being accomplished by the employees of our agency and our contracting partners that unfortunately have gone unreported and undiscussed. And a lot of that, I think, is because of our agency's historical reluctance to tell the good stories for fear of, well, what happens when there's a bad one? Well, we as part of our leadership team, and my communications team is doing an extraordinary job, are becoming much more comfortable finding ways to talk creatively about the success stories. And so what has been rewarding is I've been introduced to a lot of outstanding young men and young women who have made a very bad decision. But through the work of my staff and through our contracting partners, they are not going to let their worst decision define who they are. And we're now having opportunities to talk about young men and young women who have become highly credentialed, highly honored military personnel. We have a young man who, one of my favorite video moments is giving a speech in our facility, and he starts asking the other young men there for their institutional number. And he goes through 7 or 8 kids. I'm number 1694, or whatever it is. And here's this guy in his full military dress. And he says, "It's great to meet you. I'm 2794. And it was that moment of pause of, these are just kids. They made a bad mistake. And if we as a state do what we can to wrap around the kids, sad stories can be turned into stories of great accomplishment. And so the chance to see those it's my adrenaline rush every day.
Humans, not just numbers.
Humans, absolutely.
He's Executive Director Stephen Buck, the Office of Juvenile Affairs, running for mayor.
Not going to run for mayor.
Governor?
No. Only no. There is no political.
No caveat. No.
There is no if and or but about it. I truly I am truly blessed to serve the role I have, and every single day there are nights I go to bed saying, "What in the world was I thinking?" But every single morning I wake up saying, "You know what? If we did this, this kid could have that." And so as long as I wake up every morning feeling that way, I'm happy to serve as long as the state will have me serve.
Good stuff. I joke, of course, about those last 2 questions. It was a serious topic and conversation. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Always appreciate spending time with you.
Sure.